Vehicle excise duty is a tax that is levied as an excise duty and which must be paid for most types of vehicle which are to be used on the public roads in the United Kingdom. A statutory off-road notification must be made for a registered vehicle that is not being used on the road, and which has been taxed since January 31, 1998. VED, which is collected and enforced by the Driver and Vehicle Licensing Agency in Great Britain and by the Driver and Vehicle Agency in Northern Ireland, raised a £5.63 billion in 2009. Vehicle tax was introduced in the 1888 budget and the current system of excise duty applying specifically to motor vehicles was introduced in 1920. This excise duty was ring-fenced for road construction and was paid directly into a special road fund from 1920 until 1937, after which it was treated as general taxation. Even during this period, the majority of the cost of road building and improvement came from general and local taxation due to the tax being too low for the upkeep of the roads. Current regulations: the license is issued upon payment of the appropriate VED amount. Owners of registered vehicles which have been licensed since January 31, 1998 and who do not now wish to use or store a vehicle on the highway are not required to pay VED, but are required to submit an annual statutory off-road notification. Failure to submit a SORN is punishable in the same manner as failure to pay duty when using the vehicle on public roads. Up until October 1, 2014, a vehicle license had to be displayed on a vehicle as evidence of having paid the duty. Since that date, there is no longer a requirement to display a disc as the records are now stored in a centralized database and accessible using the vehicle registration plate details. Cars equals. Charges as applicable from April 1, 2013. For cars registered before March 1, 2001, the excise duty is based on engine size. For vehicles registered on or after March 1, 2001, charges are based on theoretical CO2 emission rates per kilometer. The price structure was revised from April 1, 2013 to add an extra charge for the first year. The first-year rate only applies in the year the vehicle was first registered and is said by the government to be designed to send a stronger signal to the buyer about the environmental implications of their car purchase. Charges as applicable from April 1, 2013 are heavy goods vehicles equals. Taxation for use of heavy goods vehicles on UK roads are based on the size, weight per axle. For full details refer to the source reference. Exempt vehicles equals. Various classes and uses of vehicle are exempt, including electrically propelled vehicles, vehicles older than 40 years, trams, vehicles which cannot convey people, police vehicles, fire engines, ambulances and health service vehicles, mine rescue vehicles, lifeboat vehicles, certain road construction and maintenance vehicles, vehicles for disabled people, certain agricultural and land maintenance vehicles, road gritters and snow plows, vehicles undergoing statutory tests, vehicles imported by members of foreign armed forces, and Crown vehicles. Each year on April 1, vehicles constructed more than 40 years before the start of that year become eligible for a free vehicle license under historic vehicle legislation. This is due to the age of the vehicle and a presumption of limited mileage. Initially this was a rolling exemption applied to any vehicles over 25 years old, however in 1997 the cut-off date was frozen at January 1, 1973. The change to pre-1973 was unpopular in the classic motoring community, and a number of classic car clubs campaigned for a change back to the previous system. In 2006 there were 307,407 vehicles in this category. As of April 1, 2014, vehicles manufactured before January 1, 1974 became exempt from the VED. In the 2014 budget, the government introduced a 40-year rolling exemption, with vehicles built before January 1, 1975 becoming exempt on April 1, 2015 and so on. Other vehicles equals. Motorcycles are taxed on engine capacity rather than CO2 emissions. Tricycles. Enforcement equals. In 2008 it was reported that flaws in DVLA enforcement practices have meant that more than 1 million late-paying drivers per year have evaded detection, which lost £214 million in VED revenue during 2006. It was estimated that 6.7% of motorcycles were not taxed in 2007. Since then, better systems have reduced the loss to an estimated £33.9 million in 2009/2010. Automatic number plate recognition systems are being used to identify untaxed, uninsured vehicles and stolen cars. Rates since April 2005, all rates are in pounds sterling. A Band K includes cars that have a CO2 figure over 225 grams per kilometre but were registered before March 23, 2006. The term road tax in common use. The term road tax, which appears in the Oxford English Dictionary, is commonly used when referring to vehicle excise duty. Despite its common usage though, this use is controversial, particularly among cycling activists. Such activists argue that, because many motorists wrongly believe that the proceeds from VED are used to fund the roads and even that the roads are funded solely from this tax, that technically there is no such thing as road tax. Peter Walker, a journalist at The Guardian, gives this opinion of it: "I've always felt the road tax argument supports a more general feeling of entitlement among too many drivers. Those who trot it out often seem to genuinely treat cyclists like we're interlopers who should be pushed aside." In an opinion piece on the BBC magazine website, a journalist explored this argument in 2013, suggesting how the term road tax is used by some drivers as a badge of entitlement to hog the road and drive badly, even intentionally hitting cyclists to argue their point. The Cyclists Touring Club explain that all taxpayers, not just motorists, pay proportionately for the roads, and that cyclists impose minimal wear and tear on them. A single-issue campaign, "I Pay Road Tax," was started by a cycling journalist in 2009 to challenge the use of the term road tax. The campaign has received support from Edmund King, president of the AA. In a BBC report on Look East in May 2010 about a cyclist who was knocked off his bike by a car, the presenter read out a series of emails from viewers expressing the view that cyclists should pay road tax if they wish to use the roads. After receiving a huge number of complaints from viewers following publicity created by I Pay Road Tax, the BBC broadcast a second piece which clarified the fact that roads are paid for out of general taxation. The term road tax is often incorrectly used when referring to vehicle excise duty in the UK media. When challenged by I Pay Road Tax, which the British Consumer magazine defended its continued use of the term on the basis that road tax was more commonly used than vehicle excise duty. A spokesman also said that while they would not stop using the terms car tax and road tax online, that they would endeavour to also make appropriate reference to the full name of the tax. One organisation that appears to be content with the current use of road tax as the vernacular for VED is the Advertising Standards Authority. Complaints that advertisements using the term are incorrect are rejected with what appears to be a templated letter stating, "Although we acknowledge that the correct term is vehicle excise duty, more commonly used phrases such as road tax are often used by advertisers to convey a message in a way that will be understood by the widest audience." History. Following the 1888 budget, two new vehicle duties were introduced: the Locomotive Duty and the Trade Cart Duty. The Locomotive Duty was levied at £5 for each locomotive used on the public roads, and the Trade Cart Duty was introduced for all trade vehicles not subject to the existing carriage duty, with the exception of those used in agriculture and those weighing less than 10 hundredweights imperial, at the rate of 5s per wheel. In the budget of 1909, the then Chancellor of the Exchequer, David Lloyd George, announced that the road system would be self-financing, and so from 1910 the proceeds of road vehicle excise duties were dedicated to fund the building and maintenance of the road system. The Roads Act 1920 required councils to register all new vehicles and to allocate a separate number to each vehicle and make provision for the collection and application of the excise duties on mechanically propelled vehicles and on carriages. The Finance Act 1920 introduced a duty on licenses for mechanically propelled vehicles which was to be hypothecated and paid into a newly established road fund. Excise duties specifically for mechanically propelled vehicles were first imposed in 1921, along with a requirement to display a vehicle license on the vehicle. The accumulated road fund was never fully spent on roads, and became notorious for being used for other government purposes, a practice introduced by Winston Churchill, when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer. In 1926, by which time the direct use of taxes collected from motorists to fund a road network was already opposed by many in government, the Chancellor Winston Churchill is reported to have said in a memo, "Entertainments may be taxed. Public houses may be taxed. And the yield devoted to the general revenue. But motorists are to be privileged for all time to have the tax on motors devoted to roads. This is an outrage upon common sense." Hypothecation came to an end in 1937 under the 1936 Finance Act, and the proceeds of the vehicle road taxes were paid directly into the Exchequer. The road fund itself, then funded by government grants, was not abolished until 1955. Since 1998, keepers of registered vehicles which had been licensed since 1998, but which were not currently using the public roads, have been required to submit an annual statutory off-road notification. Failure to submit a SORN is punishable in the same manner as failure to pay duty when using the vehicle on public roads. It was announced in the 2013 budget that SORN declarations would become perpetual, thus removing the need for annual renewal after the initial declaration has been made. In June 1999, a reduced VED band was introduced for cars with an engine capacity up to 1100 cc's. The cost of 12 months tax for cars up to 1100 cc's was £100, and for those above 1100 cc's was £155. In the pre-budget report of November 27, 2001, the government announced that VED for HGVs could be replaced by a new tax based on distance travelled, the lorry road user charge. At the same time, the rate of fuel duty would be cut for such vehicles. As at the start of 2007, this scheme is still at a proposal stage and no indicated start date has been given. The primary aim of the proposed change was that HGVs from the UK and the continent would pay exactly the same to use British roads. However, it was also expected that the tax would be used to influence routes taken, reduce congestion, and encourage low-emission vehicles. In tax year 2002 Euro 2003, it is estimated that evasion of the tax equated to a loss to the Exchequer of £206 million. In an attempt to reduce this, from 2004 an automatic £80 penalty is issued by the DVLA computer for failure to pay the tax within 1 month of expiry. A maximum fine of £1,000 applies for failure to pay the tax, though in practice fines are normally much lower. In March 2005, a graduated vehicle excise duty system, with tax bands based on CO2 ratings, was introduced as an incentive to purchase vehicles with lower emission ratings. In June 2005, the government announced plans to adopt a road user charging scheme for all road vehicles, which would work by tracing the movement of vehicles using a telematic system. The idea raised objections on civil and human rights grounds that it would amount to mass surveillance. An online petition protesting this was started and reached over 1.8 million signatures by the closing date of February 20, 2007. In April 2009 there was a reclassification to the CO2 rating-based bandings, with the highest set at £455 per year and the lowest at £0. The bandings have also been backdated to cover vehicles registered on or after March 1, 2001, meaning that vehicles with the highest emissions registered after this date pay the most. Vehicles registered before March 1, 2001 will still continue to be charged according to engine size, above or below 1549 cc's. In 2009 a consultation document from the Scottish Government raised the possibility of a VED on all road users including cyclists, but there was a strong consensus against this. From 2010 a new first-year rate is to be introduced, dubbed a Showroom Tax. This new tax was announced in the 2008 budget, and the level of tax payable will be based on the vehicle excise duty band, ranging from £0 for vehicles in the lower bands, up to £950 for vehicles in the highest band. See also, Road Fund, Vehicle Registration Plates of the United Kingdom, London Congestion Charge, Vignette, Velology Euro, the study and collection of tax discs, automobile costs. References. External links. UK vehicle tax information on DirectGov, Appley Online.